This is question number 4 on the practice homework 3 or homework 3. So this is a question about compute and interpret z-score. We know that z-score is a measure of to predict the risk of bankruptcy. So here we're provided with three financial statements of a Lockheed Martin Corporation, income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statement. So the first part A, compute and compare the Altman z-scores for both years. So both years here refer to 2005 and 2004. And we need to pay attention to the rounding requirement. Do not round until your final answer, then round your answers to 2 decimal places. So one advantage of using Excel to answer this question is that it automatically meets this do not round your final answer until your final answer, which means that you do not round intermediate calculations. And you can also choose how many decimal places you want to keep for the final answer. So if we check our lecture slides, the z-score is defined to be this. So it's 1.2 times working capital. Working capital is net working capital, which is current assets minus current liabilities. And retained earnings, EBIT. EBIT most of the time is just the operating income. And market value of the equity. So here we need the stock price, and we also need the shares outstanding, number of shares outstanding. And then we can multiply stock price time and the number of shares outstanding to get market value of equity. And so if we just copy the information from these two financial statements to Excel, and that can help us to type to avoid typing. So we just copy that and paste. Remember, we need to paste the special and the text. You can't paste HTML. And this is the income statement. And if you pay attention, actually there is some mismatch for the pasting results. So we need to move this. If we compare this with the original data, we can see that the service here with one column mismatch. So we need to move this here, and the same thing happened here. So for unallocated corporate costs, just double check whether that's correct. Seems to be the case. Yes. So that's my income statement. And for the balance sheet, we do the same. So just copy and paste the special, and text, and then just check manually. Probably it's a good practice to leave one column in space just for viewing better view. So it looks like the balance sheet is fine. And then, well, we just need to calculate 2 years, right? 2 years data for the components of the score. So we start from the first ratio here, and we start from the numerator working capital. So working capital again is also net working capital. So net working capital is defined to be current assets minus current liabilities, right? So we just here, this is 2005 total current assets, and then minus the total current liabilities is G24. And so that's 2005 net working capital, and just pull the cell to the 2004, and that's my NWC for the 2004 number. And then we can further we can further, maybe we can wait that until later. So total assets is just copy the number from the, it's right here, and just pull the cell to the next column. So that's the total asset. And for the and then we can calculate calculate the ratio, okay? Ratio. So by ratio, I mean this ratio before the coefficient. So for the first ratio is just working capital divided by total assets, and second ratio is retained earnings divided by total assets, so on and so forth. So that's what I mean by ratio here. So the first ratio is NWC divided by total assets, and we want to keep this. Well, actually, why don't we just change all this format? We want to keep this to be in percentage terms. Just keep 2 decimal places. Again, this is not to round for the round intermediate calculations. This is just for our viewing convenience to give us more decimal, 2 decimal places for the ratio. And then coefficient times ratio. So what I mean here, so let's add one more column here. Coefficient times ratio is simply this, for example, the first one is 1.2 times this ratio, and for the second one is 1.4 times this ratio. So for the first one, NWC, it's just 1.2 times this ratio here. And so that's my coefficient times ratio. This is I think it's better to do this. It's because we do want to just change the cell ratio and coefficient divided by ratio. Okay, so this is NWC divided by total assets, and I do want to keep more decimal places, percentage and 2 decimal places, and then I can pull the cell to the other to the next column, and then coefficient times ratio is simply 1.2 times this NWC divided by total asset. And then format cell again, change this to be keep 2 decimal places and in percentage terms, and pull the cell to the right. So that's my coefficient times ratio. So then let's go to the second one, which is retained earnings, right? Retained earnings, and that's also directly from the balance sheet. So it's right here. So it's retained earnings, and then pull the cell to the right, and we get the 2004 number. And then we can also do the same for the retained earnings ratio and coefficient times ratio. So the ratio is retained earnings divided by these total assets here. Again, the reason I got 0 is because I only kept no decimal place. So let me format the cell and keep 2 decimal places. And this in percentage terms for all the numbers here, and then I can pull the cell to the right to get 2004 number. And then for the coefficient times ratio, let's check the coefficient, which is 1.4 times this ratio here. and that's my coefficient times ratio. And then let's go on for the third one is EBIT, right? EBIT, and as we said, most of the time this is just operating income, so we get that number from the income statement, which is operating profit here. So that's 2005. Just make sure we get the number for the right year, and then for this number, we don't want this to be in percentage terms, just general. And then pull the cell to the right, and this is 2004 number. And then again, this is ratio and the coefficient times ratio. That's gonna be, the ratio is EBIT divided by, I guess the denominator is still total assets, because later on the denominator will be changed to total liabilities, so we need to be careful. Still, this is total assets, and pull the cell to the right to get 2004 number, and coefficient here is 3.3, 3.3 times this EBIT over total assets, and just pull the cell to the right. And just go on. The next one is market value of equity. So that's when we need the share price and number of shares outstanding. So we can go back to the setup and find the share price. That's 63.63. So just copy that number here and then multiply by the shares outstanding, which is here, 2005 number. And then I guess we need to get rid of this comma. If you don't, it's still okay. Excel will automatically get rid of that comma, of those commas. But again, don't forget the unit. Here it's directed in dollar. So if you just multiply the price by the shares outstanding, you get just the dollar, the market value of equity in dollar terms. But if you go back to the financial statements, you will see that everything is in millions of dollars. So we need to be consistent. So that means we need to divide this by million, by 1 million. So make sure you get the correct number of zeros, which is 6, right? 1 million is 60. So here again, I don't want this to be in percentage terms, just general. And then I cannot move this to the right because the number here will be different. 2004, I can just use the same procedure as I applied to 2005. So using the price here and then multiply by the shares outstanding. Copy that number here. Again, you can divide it by a million, 1 million. So again, if you just click on that, you can see that Excel will give you an error message because we entered some comma here. Just accept, just automatically get rid of that comma, those commas. So market value of equity, again, we can calculate the, but before we do that, let's check the denominator. Its total liabilities is no longer the total assets. So we just get the total liabilities, which is we check the balance sheet. Let's see, where is the total liabilities? Can we directly find the total liabilities? We can have the total current liabilities, long-term debt, and accrued pension liabilities, other liabilities. So there's no direct number provided for the total liabilities, but we can directly sum up all these liability items. That's fine. But another way, maybe quicker way to get the same number is simply to use the balance sheet identity, which means that total assets equals total liabilities plus total equity, total shareholders' equity. So to figure out total liabilities, we can just use the total assets, which is the same as total liabilities and the shareholders' equity, and subtract the total shareholders' equity from that, and that's our total liability. So let me use this shortcut. to get the same number. So it's total liabilities and the stockholders' equity, and minus this stockholders' equity. And then that's my total liability. So then I can pull the cell to the right to get the 2004 number. And then I can use the ratio and the coefficient times ratio. The ratio here is the market value of the equity divided by total liabilities. And so I can just pull the cell to the right. And then for the coefficient times ratio, let's go back and check the formula. It's 0.6. So it's 0.6 times this ratio here. And just pull the cell to the right to get the 2004 number. So the last ratio here is sales divided by total assets. So that's basically the turnover, right? The total turnover ratio. So the sales is from the income statement. So again, we need to pay attention here. Actually, we have the firm has broken down the sales into coming from the products and the service, but we just need the total. So that's my total, and then you can change the format to make it look more like a number rather than in percentage, but that won't affect my final answer, so I just leave it that way. Okay, so just calculate the ratio. Again, if you go back to the formula, the denominator changes back to total assets, so we need to be careful there. So it is sales divided by total assets is right here. So just pull the cell to the right, and then for the coefficient times ratio, the coefficient here is 0.99. 0.99 times this ratio here, and then that's my coefficient times ratio. Again, the reason I got 1, I believe, is because I kept 0 decimal place. So I want to use in percentage term and keep 2 decimal place. Again, this is not for the final answer yet. So final z-score is simply the sum of all these coefficient times ratio item, right? The first one, and then the second one, and then the third one, and then the fourth one, and then the fifth one, coefficient times ratio. All these coefficient times ratio. And for the z-score, we don't want to keep this in percentage term. Just keep that in the number, but keep a number of decimal places according to the requirement, which is to round your answers to 2 decimal places. So just keep 2 decimal places around that. And then pull the cell to the right and get my final z-score for the 2004. So that's the calculation for the z-score. Just copy number 2.94 and 2.80. That's for the. And then the next part is which of the following explain the trend in the z-scores from 2004 to 2005. Select all that apply. So here, if you pull this menu here, you can see for each choice here, for each statement here, you do have to choose whether it's correct, whether you believe it's correct or not. So Lockheed improved its short-term liquidity by increasing cash. And is that true? Let's go back to the balance sheet, okay? Because cash is one item on the balance sheet. And from 2004 to 2005, cash and the cash equivalents does seem to increase, right? From 780 to 2,164. So it does increase, improved its short-term liquidity by increasing. So this seems to be correct, okay? Lockheed decreased its liquidity due to an increase in retained earnings. This doesn't sound to be the correct statement, right? Because retained earnings has little to do with liquidity position. Liquidity is mainly measured short-term asset versus short-term liabilities, right? We have the current ratio, we have the quick ratio, we have the net working capital, those kind of variables that can measure liquidity. But retained earnings is not part of that measurement. So this is not correct. No, Lockheed improved its long-term liquidity by decreasing total liabilities. Long-term liquidity, that doesn't seem to be the correct statement, right? For the long term, we actually don't call it liquidity anymore. We call it solvency, right? Um, liquidity generally means it's just for the short term. So just looking at this statement, it doesn't sound to be correct. And then just to be absolutely sure and see whether total liabilities has been decreased or not. So we calculated the total liabilities in our calculation here, which is actually you can see that from 2004 to 2005, the total liabilities has been increased rather than decreased. So you can also judge that this is not a correct statement by simply looking at that number. And the market value of Lockheed's equity improved somewhat over the year. Let's check the market value of the equity here. This does seem to be a correct statement, right? The market value of equity does seem to increase over the years. So this is correct. And part B, which of the following statements best describes the company's annual Z-scores? So for this company, the Z-scores is below 3. We said the cutoff number for the for company to have a healthy, what we so-called healthy bankruptcy risk is that this score is greater than 3. But so this company is slightly below 3, but it's still okay. It's in gray area. So let's check. Both the animal Z scores are above. Obviously, that's not correct. Both of the animal Z scores are below. Not correct either. The animal scores have increased from 2004 to 2005, which indicates the company's bankruptcy risk has decreased. So the higher the Z score, the lower the bankruptcy risk, right? So let's check whether that's correct. Yes, 2004 to 2005, the Z score has increased. So this does seem to be the correct statement. Just to be sure, let's check the last one. And Z score has decreased. So that's not obviously not correct. So let's check our final answer. Very good. So I got 1 out of 1 point, which is very good. 100% correct. That means